to His Excellency Hossein Amir Abdollahian, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
In the name of God, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I thank Your Excellency for holding this meeting. The world knows that the Islamic Republic of Iran plays the most constructive role in helping peace and security, as well as fighting terrorism and ISIS. Mr. President, it has been 3 weeks that we have been witness to the war crimes and genocide of the occupying Israeli regime in Gaza and the West Bank of Palestine. The United States and several European countries have sided with the occupying regime of Israel without observing the UN Charter and international law. They call a Palestinian liberation movement a terrorist, which has the right to self-defense and self-determination. But they refer to the occupying and war criminal regime that is committing genocide in Gaza and having the right to self-defense. Unfortunately, this is the state of our world today. This is the situation of the Security Council, which was supposed to try to establish world peace and security. Today, United States and several European countries are watching and supporting the killing of about 7,000 civilians in less than 3 weeks by the Israeli regime in Gaza and West Bank of Palestine. And they help this regime militarily and financially. We recommend the United States to work for peace and security, not war against people, children, and women. Instead of sending rockets, tanks, and bombs to be used against Gaza, United States should stop supporting genocide in Gaza and Palestine. Mr. President, the history of Iranian civilization shows that we have always supported peace and security. But today in New York and the United Nations, I say frankly to the American statesmen who are now managing the genocide in Palestine that we do not welcome to expansion of the war in the region. But I warn, if the genocide in Gaza continues, they will not be spared from this fire. It is our home, and West Asia is our region. We do not compromise with any party and any side, and we have no reservation when it comes to our home's security. The genocide in Gaza must stop immediately. The forced displacement of the people of Gaza must be stopped immediately. Today, Gaza is waiting for urgent and vital humanitarian aid. According to international law, the Palestinian Liberation Movement, Hamas, is fighting the occupation and has a legitimate right. Mr. President, according to our negotiations, Hamas is ready to release civilian prisoners. On the other hand, the world should support the release of 6,000 Palestinians held in Israeli prisons. Now, allow me to continue the rest of my remark in the Persian language.
Mr. President, according to history and based on documents of the United Nations, the Palestinian issue has a history of about 80 years. Therefore, trying to reduce its dimensions to just one attack and on a Palestinian liberation group is a big lie. According to the international law, as well as hundreds of resolutions of this very same assembly, the entire land of Palestine is an occupied land, and according to this, the Zionist regime is recognized as an aggressor and an occupier. The Palestinian nation, like any other nation under occupation, has the indisputable and inherent right of self-determination and has the right to directly and freely decide on its independence and to create an independent government to decide for itself according to international law and as specified by Security Council resolutions number 309 and 323 of 1972 and of the Security Council in the case of Namibia, the inalienable right to self-determination and independence is permanent and does not disappear with the passage of time. Therefore, just as the prolonged occupation of the land does not create any rights for the occupier, the passage of time does not diminish in the slightest way the right to determine the fate of the occupied nation. According to the principles and rules of the international law and hundreds of resolutions of this very same assembly, the Palestinian nation, as a nation under occupation, has the legitimate right to resist the occupation using all available methods, including armed struggle. Therefore, the recent hypocritical efforts to introduce the struggle of the Palestinian nation against the occupiers as terrorist actions will not deceive the free nations and the awakened consciousness of the world. The United States of America, as the unwavering and permanent supporter of the occupying regime, is the main cause of the failures of the United Nations, especially the Security Council, in upholding the rights of the Palestinians. The country has for dozens of times prevented the Security Council from fulfilling its duties in this field. Mr. President, we believe that the complete and comprehensive solution to the Palestinian issue is only possible through the full realization of the inalienable right of this nation to self-determination and the establishment of an independent Palestinian state in all of the Palestinian territories and with Al-Quds as its capital. The entire land of Palestine, from the sea to the river, belongs only to the original Palestinians, including Christians, Jews, and Muslims. And no institution or country has the right or can give any part of it, of this land, to another person or group. The Islamic Republic of Iran believes in the right of the Palestine to resist against occupation, has offered a political and democratic initiative which includes the holding of a referendum for self-determination amongst the original residents of Palestine, including Jews, Christians, and Muslims, which has been registered by the UN as well. The essence and nature of the Zionist regime is based on aggression, occupation, crime, lies, and deception. So far, this regime has launched more than 20 wars in the region, invaded, without any exception, all its neighbors, attacked a number of countries outside its immediate region and neighborhood, and it still occupies the territory of some other Arab countries, in addition to Palestine. It has committed all the four main international crimes, namely aggression, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Not once, but many times, and in some cases, all four crimes simultaneously. And to advance his illegitimate goals, it has failed to adhere to any humane principles or legal rules. Ladies and gentlemen, we must see reality as it is. And the reality is that brutal occupation has transformed into brutal and deep apartheid. It is this terrible combination of chronic occupation and deep apartheid that gives the occupying regime the psychological permission to butcher and mass kill the people under occupation. Therefore, now is the time to consider the real face of this regime and see it as it is, as the General Assembly did in 1975 through resolution number 3379 by identifying Zionism as apartheid and racism. Mr. President, I would like to emphasize that the recent action of the Palestinian nation as well as the action of the Liberation Organization of Hamas against the occupiers, according to the applicable rules of the international law, is completely legitimate and inherent right, and attributing any other title to it is absolutely illegal and unacceptable. Claims such as the right of the so-called legitimate defense should be granted to an occupying regime is also a very ridiculous joke. It is certainly not possible to change the places of the killer and the victim by misusing some expressions. The Al-Aqsa storm operation is just a reaction to the continuation of occupation and the aggressions against the Palestinians, and in response to the widespread crimes of the Zionist regime in recent months. In fact, this operation was the volcanic eruption of the concentrated anger of the entire Palestinian nation against 75 years of continuous and widespread crimes by the Zionist regime, especially in recent months by the Netanyahu government. According to international law, resisting aggression and occupation, including by armed means, is the inherent and legitimate right of any nation, including the Palestinian nation, and it does not require the permission or order of any country or institution to exercise it. The place and how to exercise this right is based on the recognized international law. Those who repeatedly speak about the necessity of avoidance of an expansion of this conflict, and of course the Islamic Republic of Iran, we have never been after the expansion or the spread of war, and we will never be supporting it. But if, in the truest sense of the word, they don't want this war to spread out, they need to pressure the Zionist regime to fully and immediately stop the war crimes of the Israeli regime if they don't want the conflict to spread out. The recent statements of the official and military authorities of the Zionist regime and its actions in Gaza prove that the killing of more than 7,000 civilians, of which more than 62% are children and women, and the wounding and maiming of more than 17,000 civilians, completely cutting off water, electricity, fuel, food, and medicine to a population of several million, and preventing any effective assistance to them, and brutally and extensively destroying residential places, mosques, churches, hospitals, and infrastructure facilities, have been carried out completely, deliberately, and with an intent of revenge and collective punishment, which are explicitly prohibited under international law, and leave no room for doubt that these actions are a clear violation of international law and a clear example of the crime of aggression and war crimes, and also crime against humanity and genocide. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, the actions of the United States, too, which directly participates in this battle through financial and armed support, as well as direct military action and effective political support, are a clear violation of the Charter and international legal obligations of that country, and as a result hold it internationally responsible. In addition, why the United States itself is actually and in practice and directly involved in committing crimes against Palestinians, it is not in a position to invite others to exercise self-restraint and refrain from spreading the war. Therefore, we strongly warn against the uncontrollable consequences of the unlimited financial, arms, and operational supports by the White House to the Tel Aviv regime, which have led to the expansion and added to the severity of the bombardments of the civilians and the Palestinian women and children in Gaza and the West Bank. The current developments in Palestine also clearly prove that the only result of any normalization of relations with Tel Aviv is tantamount to ignoring the legitimate and historical rights of the Palestinian nation, but any kind of normalization of ties with the Israeli regime is doomed to failure. Preventing the escalation of the Palestinian situation, especially considering the current turbulent and tumultuous conditions in different regions of the world, is a global and collective responsibility. We, on our part, are ready to play a more serious role in this field in line with our recent efforts in order to restore peace and security in the west of Asia. In this line, the leaders of the Hamas Liberation Palestinian movement have voiced their readiness to release the non-military prisoners to us, and the Islamic Republic of Iran stands ready to play its part in this very important humanitarian endeavor along with Qatar and Turkey. Naturally, the release of the 6,000 Palestinian prisoners is another necessity and responsibility of the global community. Mr. President, in conclusion, I would like to thank the positive and realistic positions of the UN Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, and his efforts on the ground for sending humanitarian aid to Gaza and immediately stopping the war. I would like to emphasize that it is expected from the United Nations to employ a strong terminology and under the 7th chapter of the United Nations Charter force the Zionist regime to immediately stop its war crimes, genocide, and the mass killing of civilians and provide other grounds for the full realization of the Palestinian nation's right to self-determination. This is, of course, the inherent duty and obligation of the United Nations, which has been delayed for decades for the aforesaid reasons. Now, we all expect the current meeting of the General Assembly that has been held to delve into the Gaza and Palestinian crisis. We expect it to pass a strong resolution which is effective and influential by the General Assembly of the UN that will lead to an immediate stop to war crimes against Gaza and the lifting of the human blockade and the extensive sending of the humanitarian aid and the stopping to the forced displacement of the residents of Gaza. Thank you for your attention.